Hello, folks. We're back for episode 10 of the Popcorn Square podcast titled Suit and Tie. And today, we're going to be talking about the Beekeeper in depth, Night Swim in depth, and a bunch of other things. I'll start off. As I've said, Neff here. You guys know my name by now. Joined with
Kage
and
Buttons.
All right, and let's just start off with Beekeeper. I saw Beekeeper, I believe it was last week. Thought it was a great movie. I gave it a 7 out of 10. A 7 out of 10 in my scale, by the way, folks, is a good score. Very favorable. Like the movie, love the action, love the acting in it. I like the story. Premise was a little John Wickish to me, and I know Kage brought that up in a past episode, but I liked a lot of things about this, and I got to give him kudos for the blue GTR. I love that. So, yeah, I want to see a second film revolving around the Beekeeper and Jason Statham's character. I want to see a different, I guess I could say, premise. Like I said, the premise was John Wickish. The story wasn't necessarily so much John Wick. And Kage will go more into that. But I do want to see another film, possibly, and I want to see them take on another premise. I want to see them expand the world of the Beekeepers. From what you see in the movie, and we are going to give some spoilers here, it seems like there's not necessarily a group. It seems like there's one beekeeper at a time within a group of
a cell.
Right. Within a conglomerate of the hive, I guess you could say. So I want to know if there's any other storylines that they could take that in different directions and expand on that world, kind of like how John Wick did. Not copy that John Wick premise, but open up the world of the Beekeeper and see something else there. Because I think this movie would be a great introduction for that. Like I said, the choreography was great. Jason Statham is great. I've told Kage this. This guy is a master at his niche.
Yes.
Master at it. And he needs to keep doing that. But once again, I thought it was a good movie. Everybody should go see it. It's one of those unexpected action movies that you see in January. So I thought that was kind of pleasant to see. But I'll pass this on to Kage, let him give some thoughts on this, and we'll move on.
So Beekeeper, like we mentioned in a previous episode, this one kind of snuck up on me. I kind of heard about it earlier in the summer and saw a blip and forgot all about it. And then December rolled around and I started hearing about it from Neff. Hey, Beekeeper. And I started doing a little research. I'm like, this could be pretty badass. And then I watched it, and I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10.
Nice.
Okay, so little spoilers here. So for me personally, I feel like Beekeeper was much more relatable. In layman's terms, you're very right, Neff. It is very John Wickish. You got a guy, something happens, you hurt somebody that he cared about, and now he's gonna go on a vendetta against the world for revenge. And then some. Take everyone out. One-man army type deal.
Right.
Very much like John Wick. Okay. However, the thing that makes it more makes it an 8 out of 10 for me is that it's more relatable. Folks, here's why. This movie, without going too terribly into it, it involves scamming, internet scamming. And internet scamming, unfortunately, is a reality today. We live in the digital age. People get scammed all the time, particularly elderly folks and stuff like that. And such events are featured in this film. Me personally, unfortunately, I have been scammed myself. And I've seen videos on TikTok, online of people getting back at porch pirates, for example, stuff like that. So for me, the draw was the relativity. I related to it personally because I'm like, I've been scammed, not to this level, but it's just like it was kind of cool to watch somebody get revenge. You're cheering on the Beekeeper. You're like, yes, these people are getting what they deserve.
Right,
I'm watching it because John Wick, dude lost his dog. And don't get me wrong, that's tragic. Pets die all the time, unfortunately. You can get hit by cars or whatever. You don't hear about it on CNN, guys. You just don't. You know what I mean? It's not realistic. I mean, you don't hear about people going on one-man vendettas like Beekeeper, but people being scammed on the internet is a lot more relatable to somebody losing their dog and just going mad about it.
It's an everyday thing.
This is an everyday thing, and that's what makes it an 8 out of 10 for me, as well as my own personal experience. Thankfully, it wasn't the amount that was in Beekeeper, but Beekeeper, man, it was just a really good time. The action was solid. I mean, I didn't even care, honestly, that it was similar to John Wick. I saw that, but I was just like, what's this dude gonna do?
Still engaged.
I'm still engaged. What's this gonna do next? And the thing is, John Wick goes from person to person to person, from gang boss to this Beekeeper. He's like, not only am I gonna find the person that wronged my loved one, but I'm gonna go a step further and I'm gonna take out their whole place, and then I'm going to look up their boss, and I'm going to go to their boss, and I'm just going to go all the way up the chain
and expose the corruption at the top.
The corruption, like it, and the story as you watch it, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, by the time the credits roll, I'm like, okay, I need to know more about the Beekeepers. Where's this dude going? Where's he going next? And is this going to be like John Wick, where there's an army of beekeepers coming after this guy? I need to know more.
Exactly.
Hollywood, make a sequel, please.
Yeah,
please.
And this is why I said we definitely need a sequel, because I feel like if you just leave it at one film, it's kind of like, okay, that was cool.
I feel like it's
but
doing
there's a
it a
lot more you
disservice.
can do with it. There's a lot more you can do with it. Little tidbit: my favorite scene was the staircase sequence. There's a sequence towards the end of the movie. You could argue that's the climax of the movie, where Jason Statham's character is going up a staircase and he's shooting in between, like, basically civilians and then other people that are trying to kill him, because these people are protecting. I'm not going to give it away. They're protecting a certain character within the movie, right? And so Jason Statham is basically going through this whole staircase sequence, killing off all these people in between civilians. And I think that's the most brilliant shot part of the film.
Yeah.
What did you think about that, Kage? What scene do you think was your favorite?
Well, first off, in that scene, I didn't even think about it. You're absolutely right. To have all that chaos, but the fighting was like a dance, because there's all this chaos going on, and you can't. That's what chaos is. You can't control it. But as chaotic as that was, the man works with precision. Even though he was hurting people, doing all this stuff, he was hurting the people that needed to be hurt. The bad guys, the civilians, he was leaving them alone. I'm going to punch around this person. I'm going to throw around this civilian. Like, it's amazing that he was able to pull that off, okay? Yeah. As far as my favorite scene is in the beginning, where he tracks down the scam place. And he gets in there, and people are looking at him like, who let you in? Who is this guy? And he goes, attention, attention. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. He goes, I need each and every one of you to step away from your computers. I need you to say that I will not scam or take advantage of anyone anymore ever again, blah, blah, blah. Like, he makes them read the script, and they're like looking at each other, laughing. He goes, I'm serious. And then people started going, oh, like repeating what he says. Yeah, okay, now get out. And he pulls out a gas can and starts pouring gasoline on the computers, on some of the people that won't get up. And it's just like, oh, crap, he's not playing around. John Wick is like, I'm going to go after gang members. This guy's like, this is a civilized world, people wearing suits, just that, as horrible as it is, that's their job. He don't care.
No.
He don't care. He's like, get out. Get the hell out. I'm shutting this down right now. I'm going to call security. Please, call them.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't care.
Yeah, anybody that hasn't seen Beekeeper, go watch that. I know Buttons is going to go watch that one soon, too. And I'm sure she'll have her opinions on that and how she thinks about that movie. But, yeah, me and Kage, we definitely recommend that movie. Let's switch topics here. Still in the same realm, we're going to talk about Jason Statham a little bit. We'll talk about some of our favorite Jason Statham films. I'll start off. I'll just throw a couple out there. I'm not going to take forever here. No order at all. I really do like Jason Statham in the Fast and Furious films, in the films he did partake in. I thought he brought a new an aesthetic to it, and he brought in a different edge to that movie. Almost made it a little more serious. Now, we know leading up until Fast and Furious at this point, they're doing whatever they want to do with it. But when Jason Statham came on the scene, it was like, oh, man, this guy's here. He means business. His character in the story meant business. He had a reason to mean business. And so I think he gave that movie a little bit more seriousness, almost kind of like when The Rock showed up in Fast and Furious 5. Because when Hobbs showed up, it was game time. Now he's kind of like a caricature of himself. But yeah, as far as that goes, him in Fast and Furious was good. I like Jason Statham in Crank. I thought Crank was a
Yes.
funny film. It's an action film that has good balance. It's like funny and serious at the same time.
Yes.
Very funny movie to me. But Crank was a good one. Let's see. Beekeeper is probably going to be in there, honestly. There's another one I can't think of right now. The Mechanic. I know it's a remake, but The Mechanic was a great action film that I thought Jason Statham did awesome in that. And I cannot leave out Transporter. I'm going to say 1 and
Yes.
2.
Yes.
3 got a little strange, but 1 and 2 for sure. I think Transporter is what really put Statham on the map. The Audi, the suit, you know what I mean? I thought Transporter was really good for Statham. So those are my favorite Jason Statham movies. I am going to watch Wrath of Man 2. I know it came out maybe a year or two ago. I do need to watch that, but I'm going to watch that movie. But that's my list of Jason Statham films. We'll move it on to Kage here, see what he says.
I mean, you already mentioned the heavy hitters for me. Crank 1 and 2 is just a hilarious, good time. You love the action, but you also chuckle at just the funny stuff that
Right.
in a normal setting, you shouldn't probably laugh at that, but it works. It works. Transporter, love the Transporter movies, 1 and 2. 3 must not be that good because I couldn't tell you a single scene from it. I'm just being dead honest. The Italian Job, I feel like it's kind of underrated. That one is always a good time, kind of a Ocean's 11 vibe for me. So I like that. I'd say a big one to me that I don't hear enough people talking about would be Death Race. I really like Death Race. Coming from me being a gamer, I feel like it is at the time, it was we didn't have a Twisted Metal show or Twisted Metal movie, so it's a movie about people, prison inmates that are on death row, and they have to participate in this televised pay-per-view car contest, and it's horrific, but if they win their freedom. But of course, it's not so straightforward. There's double crossing, there's betrayal, blah, blah, blah. Just a great film filled with a lot of practical effects. And you get to see Jason Statham being just the all-around badass that he usually is in all of his films. But yeah, those are mine.
Sums it up. Buttons, got a little list there?
I do have a list. And I just want to say that Jason Statham, for me, when I first saw him, he was a no-name actor for me. And I didn't realize at the time, watching this movie, that he would actually be the one out of the group that would become the most famous, from this movie. And that was Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Now, this is a throwback to 1998, and it was actually, like I said, his first movie. He went into this movie, he was already 30 years old, and it was his first movie going out there, which I feel like is rare nowadays for somebody to be, or not to have had any kind of film credits prior to their 30s. And I didn't know that about him until I looked into that and found that fun little tidbit. But Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, if you haven't seen it, it's a kind of a gangster type movie. You guys, the group of friends that he has, it's kind of almost like, they were childhood friends or whatever, but it's goofy in a sense, like the way that they did it. It's kind of slapstick comedy, meets just kind of like over the top, like these mobster kind of guys. And of course, because it is British, some of the vernacular and some of the dialects and that can throw you a little bit, because you're not, at least from my perspective, I was not really sure what they were talking about all the time, just because of the words that they were using and their dialects. But it's still a good, fun, just kind of interesting action movie in my opinion. And like I said, it involves, a robbery and some mobster type people, and it was just a good time, especially for me back in the day. And then, we already covered most of the other ones. The other one I will note as being one of his bigger films, I think, was Snatch. And I feel like that one got a lot of praise, and I feel like he had a very big role in that one. And again, I think Jason Statham does really well with collaboration movies. I mean, he's obviously done his own movies where he's the lead and everything else, but as we've seen with like the Fast and Furious movie, The Italian Job, Expendables, Snatch is another good one, and the Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, he does really well in a collaboration as well, and he ends up having, those moments where you're like, look at you, you little gem. Like, look what you're doing, You seem like this completely different character, and then you open your mouth and you give us just this wonderful performance that we weren't expecting from this guy who's normally thrown into the group, and he looks like the odd duck. He looks like the one who didn't belong in the group, but there he is, shining. They put a little polish on him, and look at him go.
Good point. And like you said, the collaboration, that was a great point, because like I said, Fast and Furious is another collaborative movie
Yes.
for him, where he's not the main character. He has a big part of the film, especially when he's the villain. I think he comes in Fast and Furious 6. It's 6,
At the
I believe.
end of 6, I think.
I believe
was
it's at the
it-
top of 6.
Was it the top of
Top of
6?
6,
Okay.
right, because his brother gets hurt in the,
Was that in 5?
yeah. Well, actually, that was 6.
Well, 'cause his
I
brother-
want to say it was 7. You're actually right.
Okay.
He comes in at the top of 7.
Okay.
You're right, because 6 is when they have Letty. Her mind has been lost,
Yeah,
basically, and
yeah.
the brother takes over. So you're right. Good catch there. Yep. Fast and Furious 7 is when Statham comes in there as Shaw. And funny you bring that up, because we're going to go on to, do we think there will be potential for another Hobbs and Shaw? Seeing as how The Rock is back in good graces with Universal and Vin Diesel, and Statham's been in good graces with them. Do you think there will be another potential for that? Because I liked Hobbs and Shaw 1. I thought it was a great spinoff, honestly. And I wasn't watching that movie saying, where's Dom? Where is Letty? You know what I mean? I thought it was a good little story. You had Idris Elba in there as the villain.
Right.
It was a good movie. So I wonder if they'll actually run that back now because everybody's on the same page. I think it would be cool, and I think people would watch it. I think Hobbs and Shaw did pretty well at the box office as well. Kage, did you get to see Hobbs and Shaw?
Unfortunately, I did not.
Okay. Buttons, did you see Hobbs and Shaw?
I did see Hobbs and Shaw, and I will say, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe Hobbs and Shaw came out right around the pandemic. I don't know if it was 2019.
2019.
Yeah, so the first time I watched it was like, I was like, hey, I can't leave the house, and we found it streaming and we watched it at home. So I didn't go see it in the theaters, but I did watch it. I did stream it while it was still technically in theaters, so had to do the whole pay-per-view thing. But I enjoyed it. Like you said, I thought it was a good, fun little, fast pace. Like it was go, 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 the whole movie. So that was fun. And there was, for me, when Shaw is first introduced in Fast and Furious, he's very serious, very, intimidating.
Right.
He's playing the villain. He's playing the bad. And then Hobbs and Shaw, he's like, I'm a badass, but I'm gonna help hold this baby and throw him up in the air.
Oh, in the airplane.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and, and he's all like, Gucci, Gucci, goo, And so it breaks that character's, whole, his persona by giving him this different outlook, this different view of him being like, all right, kid, here's how it's gonna go. And he's talking to an infant who's not gonna know, but he's like, all right, kid, we're in this together. And so it breaks character for him in a fun way, in a lighthearted way.
It shows another aspect of his side there.
Exactly. So, and I mean, when you introduce it or you bring him back in the other Fast and Furious movies, you don't see that side of him because it's, again, all right, seriousness now.
We got to focus on the action.
Right. Whereas Hobbs and Shaw to me felt like pure comedy. It was not supposed to be a serious film. There was some serious moments, but it was a comedy. And so I feel like if they did do that second Hobbs and Shaw, which I would definitely watch because I'm a fan of the comedies, I do think that they need to look at his character and still have that good balance of who he is instead of just making him a clown. Because I hate when they do that. I hate when they take a character who's supposed to be serious, he was introduced serious, and they make him a clown. I've talked about that before. But I did enjoy it, and I would be up for a sequel.
So I got the numbers on that. The budget was $200 million, big budget, right? The box office was 760 million. So 3X did pretty well. I think if they ran that back, people would actually watch it. I think it would actually be a good time to do that again, too, because I think people are growing old and tired of the Fast and Furious as it is. And I think Fast 10 actually shows us a lot because the box office wasn't that good. I wouldn't say that movie was successful. And then again, the budget was huge as well. So we've always talked about that. If you have a big budget, your margin for error is extremely slim. Moving on. State of action films after watching The Beekeeper. Do you think action films in general are in a good place? Or do you think we should maybe make more films like Beekeeper, bring down the budgets, market a little more, try to get into more audiences, I guess, radius? What do you think? Because I think as far as action films, there's not really too many action films, like masculine action films. John Wick, one of the last ones. Beekeeper was one of the last ones we just saw. I know we talked about the movies that we want to see in 2024. Nothing really stood out to me other than Mission Impossible as far as action based, you know what I mean?
You
So
could make the argument for Argyle is going to be heavy on action.
maybe, but I think it's going to be more comedic than straight heavy on action. It's going to be more Mr. and Miss Smith than 007.
But it's
my
got
opinion.
I feel like it's got a bigger cast, though, an all-star
Exactly.
cast. So
So-
they're going to have to give everybody a scene.
And I feel like when you're in action movies, it's funny you brought that up, Kage. Good note, because I feel like when you see pure action movies, it's usually surrounding around one character. It's not a cast of a bunch of characters.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Typically. What do you think, Kage?
You know, action movies are really tricky. I think we can all agree that we want to see more original stories as opposed to sequels. It's
Right.
so easy to throw in another Fast Furious movie, throw in another Mission Impossible or whatever. The John Wick movies.
Right.
That's kind of been the bread and butter for the action film industry these days. So it's going to be interesting to see, what we see. I think I think ultimately, for me personally, expectations and hope, I want to see more originals and less sequels. So, what's it called? Yeah, Beekeeper. Beekeeper, not an original story per se, just because it comes in the coattails of John Wick just ending, or
Right.
John Wick 4 just ending. But at the same time, I feel like it stood on its own.
Right.
And maybe, hopefully, we get a sequel. Hopefully, maybe that could open the doors for people to say, hey, they tried to make something. Maybe we should try to make something.
Right. And when I say action, I'm talking about in the context of action movies like Extraction, John Wick, Beekeeper.
Yeah.
Like that type of action. I know Buttons just showed me. I know Furiosa was on there. That's action, but Mad Max is a little different.
Yeah.
Mad Max is a little different. But we will be talking about Mad Max. We will get to that. That's a movie that you got to see on a big screen as well. But yeah, I'm wondering. I feel like they should stick to movies like Beekeeper. But once again, you know how Hollywood works. The movies have to make money. If they see that the movie doesn't make money, they're going to back off of that.
Well,
I
yeah,
know
it's a
there was-
business. It makes
I
sense.
know, what was it Sasu? Wasn't Sasu an action movie that was actually made by the same studio? Was it Blumhouse that did John Wick? Who did John? There was a specific, I cannot pinpoint it. Is it Seisu or Sasu? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. One of the ways is correct. It was like, I want to say almost Nazi Germany era, and the guy has the dog, and he has the gold. There's an action film from last year.
Okay.
So once again, that type of action film.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if they do more things like that. I don't know what that did in box office. I know, was it Mr. Nobody? That was
Yeah.
another film that was kind of in that same vein. I wonder if they focus on that. But once again, we know how Hollywood is. If it doesn't make money, they'll stray away from that. But do you have anything else to say about that as far as action films and the state of them?
Yeah, I will say, as far as action film goes, and we've talked about this before, which is Hollywood tends to follow trends pretty closely amongst the studios. So that's why you'll see we have movies come out very similar to each other across the studios, because they sit there and they go, oh, you're making a dinosaur movie, let's make a dinosaur movie too. And they kind of keep those in their wheelhouse, ready to slap them out as soon as another studio announces what they're releasing. And when they start grabbing those release dates as well, because they're like, oh,
that's a
what are
good
you
point.
throwing in there? Because we have to try and beat it, or at least match it in order to stay competitive with these other studios. Or, oh yeah, we don't want to release this film in that month because we don't want to compete with that studio's film. They threw $200 million at that movie, and we threw $10 million at this movie, and we don't want to have that competition because we want a return on our investment.
Right.
Right.
So one of the things I will say about action films in general as of late is I feel like the majority of the content has been focused more on our superhero movies. So we're getting our action, related budgets and things like that are going towards those type of movies, because in, the last decade we've had dozens of, Marvel and DC and just superhero related and themed movies come out. And so with that, I feel like that's where we kind of scaled back a little bit on just the traditional action movies. And I would argue that if you go back into like the 90s, it was not uncommon to have several different types of those action movies just flood the theaters. And even ones that they brought in from international, because that's how I got onto all these Jackie Chan films. I want a Jackie Chan franchise to come back. We had Shanghai Night, Shanghai Noon. We had I'm a big fan of Jackie Chan, but
Rightfully so.
He had a good blend of action and comedy, and of course all of his stunts and everything and the choreography that went behind those films were just pure gold. You get into the different collaborations that he's done over the years, he has stretched. And I would love to see an action film that gets a franchise that is more like that brings in, people from different cultures and brings us that action that way. Because I love a good kung fu movie, like I do. I love a good, martial arts or even mixed martial arts. Like, bring me some of that action, because I've seen a car explode,
Yeah.
But Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was just on a whole different level of martial arts, and that was beautifully done, beautiful choreography on that. Just the cinematography on it and the story itself was beautiful, and you don't get that here. You get Michael Bay, who's going to explode everything. Like, there's a water balloon, big fireball.
Yes.
Right.
And I get it. It's fun. It's action paced. Everybody loves to see a car explode or them rip out the side of a building. Speed cut a freaking bus in half. Everybody loves this. But I feel like I would love, as far as action films go, to give me like a good franchise that's related around martial arts. The last one that I can think of that was decent was Ip Man. And if nobody has seen Ip Man, go out there. There's, I want to say there's at least 3 now, if not 4, but they were a good, solid martial arts movie, and they were interesting. And I feel like I would love to see some of those movies kind of come back into theaters and provide me a good, solid action movie.
Good
that
point.
way.
And just kind of going off that, when we were talking about the similarities between Beekeeper and John Wick, one thing I don't think we mentioned was the thing I like about Beekeeper. This man is a badass. He is a one-man army. John Wick, for 4 movies, he is gun fu, I think is the term I've seen online. Like, you give this man a gun and he just goes to town. If his gun runs out of bullets, he'll take the gun right out of the holster of the guy he's fighting and keep moving, like breathing.
That's if his gun ever runs out of bullets.
No kidding, right?
It's ran out a couple times.
So, but like Beekeeper, most of that was hand-to-hand combat, and that's what kind of spiced it up for me. For so many years, we've seen explosions, we've seen, gunfights and stuff like that. So I'm like, that was really refreshing. But at the same time, once he got a hold of a gun, make your peace with God, because
it's over with.
It's over with.
Over with completely. Let's move on to Night Swim. We all saw Night Swim. I thought the movie was decent, like the story. I like the tone of the movie. I could see James Wan's influence on that movie. heavily. Like I said, I thought it was paced well. There were some things that they could have worked, but I think it was a decent film, and I like the aspect of the pool. Just that whole dynamic. I haven't seen it. I know we've discussed this outside of the podcast that there are some similar movies, same premise, same story type thing. But when I saw it like that, I thought that was really decent. There are a couple plot holes in there that we've talked about offline, but we'll leave that for another discussion. But yeah, I like Night Swim. I thought it was a decent movie. I don't need a sequel for it. Don't need a sequel for it. It was good. It did what it needed to do. And I would advise that people go watch it as well as watch Beekeeper. It'd be a nice little balance, get some action, some horror in there.
Yeah.
Kage, how did you feel about Night Swim overall?
Night Swim, I gave it a 6 out of 10. I gave it a 6 out of 10. And just to understand, make it known my scale, if I give a movie anything like a 5 or under, that means I'm watching the movie, I'm like, I can't wait for this to get out of here. I'm thinking about something else I have to do. 6 out of 10 says the film had me engaged. I want to know what this entity is. What's going on? Are they going to stop it? Can they stop it? Like that, like you have me, okay? But what stopped it from being higher than a 6 out of 10 was I really wanted I've said it before in other episodes, I'm a sucker for origin stories. I would like to know a little more backstory on what this thing is, where did it come from, why it's here. And Night Swim gives us a 30-second, that's your backstory. A 30-second story, this is what it is. I'm like, give me something. Give me Pennywise. Give me an ancient pool was built on an ancient Indian burial ground. Just something. You don't have to go too deep, but the explanation just didn't do anything for me. I'm like, what is this thing? You keep the movie is set around this backyard, this pool. I gotta know more, and I didn't get more, and that killed it for me.
How do you feel about a potential sequel?
I don't need it. I feel like I don't need it. I feel like if they were gonna try to do it again, I would probably like to get more backstory. I want to know what this thing is. I guess I wasn't satisfied with
Maybe
the ending.
a prequel rather
There
than,
we go.
because you see the
Now
family,
there's something
spoiler
like
alert, buries the pool at the end. Oh no.
Yeah. No, that's a great. I
Then you
agree
get
with
that
that.
full backstory and maybe
Yeah, because
another
if you gave
family,
me
a lineage.
if you gave me a prequel, then I could go back, like a good prequel, I can go back and rewatch Night Swim, and I'm like, I get it.
Respect it a little
I
differently.
respect it a little differently now.
Buttons?
So, I spoke briefly with both Neff and Kage about this movie, and I enjoyed it. Just as Kage, I gave it a 6 out of 10. But I will say this, I do agree fully with you about the backstory. I actually feel like they could have taken it 2 different ways in the writing of it. And so I don't know if it was a failing on the writer's part to pick a way to drive this movie to what the actual meat and potatoes, the story was. And then their want to try and give it more of a backstory. And I feel like they could have focused on one or the other, and they kind of failed on both ends because they tried to do both. So at the beginning of the film, they talk about the previous owners of the house. And I'm not going to give too much away about the movie. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who wants to watch it, because for me, most horror movies, once I know how it ends, like, I'm never going to go watch it again because I know how it ends. I know what happens. To me, a good horror movie is one that I want to rewatch even though I know the ending. And this one, to me, I'm not going to watch it again. I have no interest in seeing the same story because I know how it ends. But at the beginning, you learn about what happened previously in the house, and then they have like a little brief, like less than 5 minutes of the film to kind of give you a backstory, like an even further backstory of like the lore of this pool. And to me, I wanted more of that. Like the backstory, from the previous owners should have been either that's all you know about the house and the pool, or it's a little blip and it's just barely in there. That should have been the less than 5 minute explanation of what's going on. But I do think that Night Swim has its own merits. It did have a couple of good jump scares in there. Because they kind of introduce it as having multiple different entities, haunting this pool or affecting the family. I wanted to know what their backstory was. And so for me, it was kind of like, oh wait, that's a different, where did that person come from? Kind of feeling where you're just like, okay, but this is a character, this is a entity that I don't know anything about. Why are they there? And it just kind of briefly glosses over it. And so to me, that would have been more helpful to have that backstory on not just, more time spent with the last family that was there, but a deeper dive into the history of it and
No pun
a
intended.
pattern. Yes, and a pattern that is obviously they just glossed over as, this just keeps happening and nobody's done anything except for build a pool here. Because they briefly gloss over at different points in the movie. And I feel that because this was a short story originally, that they expounded into a 2-hour movie, that they had a lot of extra that they were trying to fill in, and they just didn't know how to stretch.
Oh, so they didn't technically have enough material.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot. Well, I mean, I feel like they had the material there, they just didn't know which direction to take it. They were like, we have to put this in a 2-hour movie, and we could spend, a long time explaining this, but the whole premise of the movie is specifically what's happening to this family in this moment. And I don't think they gave enough information on one side or the other of what's going on as it pertains directly to the family. I will say, as far as the acting goes, most of these actors are unknown actors and actresses. So in that respect, I felt like, they did a pretty good job. Like, I felt like it was very well directed, and you didn't feel like this was actors or actresses who didn't know, what they were doing or that they were just horrible at it. So I will give them props. I think that it's going to launch the careers, especially of the teenage daughter. I think this is probably a very good move for her to showcase her talent, and I think she'll get some more roles out of it. But all in all, I agree. Prequel, if anything, no sequel.
Yeah, something I was thinking about as you were talking about Night Swim. So I don't know if any of you out in the audience or Buttons or Neff, back in the day, I used to watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? And they had an episode about a haunted pool. So when I saw Night Swim, I'm trying to think of what can I compare this to, and the very first and only thing that pops into my head was an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark that I saw in the 90s about a haunted pool. That episode, I give a 10 out of 10 to this day. No, hear me out. Because that was rated one of the highest rated, scariest episodes in the 90s on Nickelodeon, for a Nickelodeon show. That stuck with me more than Night Swim.
Nostalgia.
Well, like I'm not even going into a nostalgia kick. I'm just talking about how to tell a story. How to tell a story, because back in those are not to go too deep into it, but like that's 90s. There's no name actors. You know what I mean? You're a kid. You don't know. Low budget. You don't care. You don't know. But the point is, when you're watching something scary, does it stay with you?
Right.
Do you want to know more? Because if you can do those two things, at least speaking for myself, in horror, if you give me something that makes me want to know more about that world, that monster, that spirit, whatever, you got me. You got me. And unfortunately, Night Swim didn't do that. Like, it told me about this entity, and I'm like, I want to know more about this. I want to know what's the story. I feel like there is the little description of, hey, here's the tenants who lived here before, and then I guess they made that their big reveal. And I'm like, that was kind of disappointing. I feel like I don't know what I wanted, but I wanted something more. So you talked to the last tenants and they told you what happened. They knew something was awry with this pool, but they did the thing, but you didn't really get any more information from them. Oh, so you guys had a scary problem when you guys lived here and you didn't do anything? Really?
So to your point, the movie, in my opinion, didn't do a good enough job expressing this particular condition of the pool, which is, it's a wishing well, people. This pool is a wishing well.
yeah.
So, you know, that's the whole premise. Sorry to spoil it for you guys, but the pool is a magical pool that grants wishes, all right? And it's evil.
But, yeah.
So, I mean, that's the whole premise of this story. And again, that's why we want that backstory. How did it become a magical wishing pool?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
you know, like,
Thank
there's like, and that's why I say, like, you need to either stick with one thing or the other. Either you're going to tell us how far back this goes and why it's, you know, that instead of like a 30-minute, oh, well, people used to worship this land because it granted wishes and da 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 da, and there's so many thematic things that point back to this wishing well in the story that they could have delivered more. The kids are diving for quarters in the pool. All right, that's the
Foreshadowing.
That's the foreshadowing. That's the, oh, damn, I didn't realize that's what I did when I threw some quarters in the pool. I was making a wish, right?
Right.
Wow.
And so, you know, we've talked about some of these other movies, you know, that are like the Djinn, right? Where you have this genie and you make a wish and then you find out, he's just going to screw you over. You know, he's going to twist your wish. And that's what this is. It's
It's
evil,
a monkey paw movie.
Yeah.
I'll grant your wish, but
exactly, I'm gonna make you pay a price that you
Right,
didn't
right.
know about when you made your wish. And so with that being said, the concept was there. I just felt like they didn't deliver
it kind
enough.
of landed flat.
Nice. I think that was a good discussion, guys. I think we're going to wrap it up there. That's going to do it for episode 10 of the Popcorn Square podcast. As I always say, like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell for notifications. This is Neff signing off, along with...
This is Kage.
Buttons.
Be safe.